Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Michelle and today is my 20th episode, and I finally found this article that actually got me started and curious into these old newspaper articles and all the valuable information that they contained. So I'm going to read it at the end. The first one that I'm going to read is the interior of an Ohio mound. But then I was looking up here and they were talking about all these crystals, agates and onyx and cornelian, and it caught my eye right here. It says, according to King, Natural History of Gems, a Florentine anatomist long ago accomplished this feat, although unfortunately the secret died with him. He is said to have petrified human viscers into real agates. In the hospital of San Sperto may be inspected still by the incredulous, says King, a tabletop made up of hearts, lungs, livers, etc., thus agatized into one large slab, meat board for a banquet of vampires. Organic remains in agates are not unknown, for Bowerbank states that in the moss agates of Aberstein he has found microscopic organisms, and Dr. Heddle that he has found undoubted organic remains of considerable size in agates from Ayrshire and other localities. That's from the Edinburgh Scotsman. That's freaking crazy. I mean, these newspapers, you'll just be reading an article and then you'll see something right next to it, which is in the last article that I'll be reading. But anyway, here's this one because, it's interesting to know what they found in mounds back then, because they don't really tell us now. The interior of an Ohio mound. The work done by Professor F.W. Putnam on the mounds of the farm of Edwin Harness near Chillicothe, Ohio, has been very thorough. In an account of his work, he says of one of the mounds opened, this mound proved to be of great interest and of a character unlike any other we have explored. It's 160 feet long and from 80 to 90 feet wide, 13 to 18 feet high along the central portion, which rises gradually from the southern to the northern part. Up to this time, we have made an exploration of about 1/4 of the mound and have certain that it is a burial mound of remarkable character. About 40 feet from the center of the northern portion, we discovered the first of the burial chambers, of which we afterward found a dozen in all. These chambers were made by placing logs 5 to 6 inches in diameter on the clay which forms the lowest layer of the mound in such a way as to make enclosures 6 to 7 feet in length and 2 to 3 in width and about a foot in height. The body was placed evidently wrapped in garments as indicated by the charred cloth and mats found in the several chambers. With the bodies were burned various objects such as copper plates, earrings, shell beads, and in one instance long knives clipped from flint. In 2 of the chambers, the skeletons were found extended at full length within the chambers, the outlines of which could be traced by the cast or imprint of the logs in the clay, the logs having decayed, leaving simply a dark dirt. On the breast of one of them was a copper plate or ornament of thin copper. The action of the copper had preserved the structure of a finely woven piece of cloth found between the plate and the bones of the chest. In the other chambers, the bodies have been burnt on the spot, as conclusively shown by the relative positions of the bones, and the body had fallen beyond the fire and escaped burning. It also became evident, as our exploration progressed, that these chambers were covered by little mounds of gravel and clay, and that those were where the burning had taken place. The covering was made before the body was consumed, as shown by the small amount of ashes. and the reduction of the logs to charcoal in their place on the clay floor of the chamber, which was burnt to a various thickness according to the greater or less fire that was kept up. It also seems probable that the burials and cremations were not all at the same time, and after all these little mounds had been made, earth was brought from different places about and heaped all over, forming the large mound as a monument to mark the spot. It is likely that as we go on with the work, many more of these burial chambers will be found. It is our intention to thoroughly explore the remaining portion of this interesting work in the spring, or as soon as my duties will permit me to return to field work. And that one was from 1893. This is 1899, The Vanished Race, a building that housed 6,000 cliff dwellers. A ruined Aboriginal city on a cliff 1,000 feet high, skulls of people that had double teeth all around, some remarkable relics. And maybe some of you who live out there can use these directions to get to this place. Laden with relics of the vanished race of the cliff dwellers, the revered Dr. George L. Cole has returned from a journey to the ruined cities of southeastern Colorado and New Mexico. Valuable results were secured by excavations in an ancient communal dwelling as yet unnamed, which stands on the cliffs of the Santa Fe River, 14 miles from Espanola, New Mexico. This is the largest pueblo yet discovered in the United States, and Dr. Cole was practically the first to visit it with scientific objects in view. He found stone implements and pottery of extreme rarity, and the bones of a race, all of whose teeth were molars or grinders. Among the bones, excavated from a burial mound on the mesa, were a woman's femurs measuring 19 inches, a length which indicates that this aboriginal giantess must have been at least 7.5 feet tall. The cliff on which the unexplored ruins stand rises 1,000 feet above the isolated rocky, 1,000 feet above the surrounding country. On one side of the isolated rocky mass is the valley of the Santa Fe River, on the other that of the Santa Clara. Up to 600 feet is the shelf, which furnished a nesting place for the cliff dwellers of nobody knows how many centuries ago. In the soft pumice stone they burrowed dens for their families. Eventually, the original shelters in the cliffs grew to be a great warren. Room after room was hewn out until the rows were 4 or 5 feet deep. Under the shelter of the overhanging cliff, walls were built, extending the rows of rooms. The cliff dwellers were sheltered from rain or storm, and their homes were inaccessible for their enemies. Not satisfied with their rock caverns, the cliff dwellers climbed upward, and on the mesa, 400 feet above the shelf on which the caves opened, and built a communal dwelling. This mesa is about 3/4 of a mile wide and 1.5 miles long, with cliffs all about and the best of opportunities for defense. On its edge was reared a watchtower of granite, whose height Dr. Cole believes to have been not less than 60 feet. The blocks were painfully carried up the 1,000-foot cliff, for the nearest granite deposits are at a considerable distance. For greater security, a wall was built across the middle of the mesa. Man, these guys must have been warring with some crazy people. On this rock platform, 1,000 feet up in the air, there stand today the ruins of 2 communal dwellings, one evidently much older than the other. The older dwelling is yet untouched, and what little exploration of the more modern one Dr. Cole had time for amounts to a mere scratch on the surface. There were not less than 1,600 rooms in the larger building in its prime, says Dr. Cole, and probably 2,000. The building measured 240 by 300 feet. It was of blocks of stone measuring 6 by 6 by 15 inches, quarried from the cliffs below and carried up by the workmen. The rooms were roofed by timber, and the walls then carried higher. In the center was a great court, a common kitchen for all, from which radiated immense numbers of rooms. The building spread with the growth of the community until it was 3 stories high, and the rooms stretched away 12 deep from the central court, with smaller courts here and there. Dr. Cole estimates that the population averaged about 3 to a room, which would make between 4,800 and 6,000 people dwelling in the immense pueblo, besides those who lived in the cliff caves. The rooms at the sides of the communal dwelling averaged about 14 feet in size. On the upper stories they were mostly smaller, some being only 7 by 14, some 7 by 21, some found as large as 14 by 21 feet. With the trophies of his summer exploration spread out about him, Dr. Cole has turned his parlor into an anthropological museum. One table is covered with water jugs and incense pipes, the sofa hidden under stone axes, mortars, pestles, weaving shuttles, and pottery. Another table is decked with a row of grinning skulls and huge crossbones. Beneath it comfortably repose all the parts of a skeleton, from the toe bones to the shoulder blades, waiting to be wired together, and strewn about are bows and arrows, baskets, jugs of twisted twigs made watertight by pitch, modern Indian pottery, photographs by the score, and a stump of petrified wood. The skulls are a particularly valued possession. "Look at those teeth," said Dr. Cole, tenderly fondling the skull of the giantess. "She has no incisors, no cutting teeth in front, as have all the other races of which I have any knowledge, and I wonder how many that is. She has grinders all around, and so have the other skulls. That shows they were grain eaters rather than meat eaters. The foreheads are high, and the shape of the skull shows intelligence, but notice how curiously they are flattened at the back." So, yeah, crazy people with giant teeth living 1,000 feet up on the mesa. That's crazy. I really would love to know what was going on back then. Okay, this one is from 1893. Live mastodons in Alaska. The Slickeen Indians positively assert that within the last 5 years they have frequently seen animals which, from the descriptions given, must be mastodons. In spring, while out hunting, one of these Indians came across a series of large tracks, each the size of the bottom of a salt barrel, sunk deep in the moss. He followed the curious trail for some miles, finally coming out in full view of his game. As a clue, these Indians are the bravest of hunters, but the proportions of this new species of game filled the hunter with terror, and he took to swift and immediate flight. He described the creature as being as large as a post-trader's store, with great shining yellowish-white tusks, and a mouth large enough to swallow a man in a single gulp. He further says that the animal was undoubtedly of the same species as those whose bones and tusks lie all over that section of the country. The fact that other hunters have told of seeing these monsters harrowing or browsing on the herbs up along the river gives a certain probability to the story. Over on 40 Mile Creek, bones of mastodons are quite plentiful. One ivory tusk, 9 feet long, projects from one of the sand dunes on that rock, and single teeth have been found that were so large that they would buy a good load for one man to carry. I believe that the mule-footed hogs still exist. Also, that live mastodons play tag with the aurora every night on 40 Mile Creek in Alaska. So what do you think? You think mastodons still exist? Maybe. And this is my favorite one, an Indiana serpent. It was of fire but frigid, and did some startling things on the western farm. "If you should ever pass the Western farm near Delphi, Indiana," said John Gilbert, "you couldn't help but notice a shepherd dog lying on one end of the front porch with his head on his forepaws, apparently asleep. And he is asleep. He went to sleep, according to the story that Farmer Weston tells, one night in February last, and he has never wakened since. When that dog went to sleep, he weighed about 50 pounds. He weighs now more than 150 pounds, for he is petrified. Some folks declare that he is simply a dog carved from stone, but that is before they have heard Farmer Weston's story. After they hear that, they have nothing more to say. They can't say anything. They simply marvel." Farmer Weston is a member of the Baptist Church and only has one arm, so it is hardly likely that he would lie about a little thing like a petrified shepherd dog. And more than that, the change in the dog's status is really not the most surprising thing about the farmer's story. I was never any nearer the Western farm than Richmond, Indiana, and consequently, I never saw the dog. But a man who saw it not long ago told me the story Farmer Weston told him about the dog and the amazing manner in which it was petrified. Just after dark one night, early in February, the farmer left his house, he said, to go to his barn to attend to his horses for the night. The weather was cold, but there was no wind to stir, so the farmer was surprised to hear a noise like the soughing of a heavy wind through the branches of trees. This sound was all the more surprising because there were no trees anywhere around for a wind to sough in. A public road passes the house 100 yards or so distant, and the noise seemed to come from the direction of the road. Farmer Weston stopped and listened to the singular noise, and as he listened, he saw a sight no Hoosier farmer ever gazed on before, and he says he is willing to bet his farm on it. I thought he was going to say he was willing to bet his arm on it, but that's a bad joke. "And what do you think it was?" said the man, who said that he was saying just what Farmer Weston had said to him. "A snake, and not only a snake, but a snake of fire. A regular fiery serpent came suddenly from the road and wound and wiggled and zigzagged its way toward Weston, traveling as fast as a steam engine. According to the farmer's data, this fiery snake was 30 feet long and 1.5 feet in diameter. Now, naturally, one would suppose that a snake carrying as much fire as that along with it would quickly raise the temperature of the weather in any district it was traveling through. But things worked just the contrary with this snake. As it approached Farmer Weston, he could feel the temperature getting rapidly lower until he was sure it felt way below zero. This alarmed the farmer, for he hadn't things just fixed around the premises for such a sudden and unprecedented change in the weather. Although the fiery serpent was coming right at him, accompanied by the soughing noise he had heard, Farmer Weston did not move from his tracks. But the snake suddenly changed its course when it had come within 20 feet of him and made directly toward the barn. As the snake turned from its course, the sound that was traveling with it changed and became exactly such a noise as it made by a steam gong. At the same instant, Weston felt a sharp electric shock, and he was unable to move a muscle or utter a sound. He was like one paralyzed. The snake made straight for the barn, climbed right up the side of the building to the roof, and for 5 minutes contorted itself in fiery gyrations all around the outside of the barn. Reminds me of like a plasma ball. Weston expected every second to see the building burst into flames, but nothing of the kind occurred. At last the fiery serpent climbed to the peak of the roof and raised up on one end of itself perpendicularly in the air, where it swayed and whirled for a minute or more, when there came a sound like the report of a distant cannon, and the startling exhibition was at an end. The fiery serpent disappeared as if it had never been. With the report that doused the glim of the snake, so to speak, Farmer Weston felt another strong electric shock, but it seemed to come as an antidote to the first one, for he instantly recovered the use of his limbs and his voice. The temperature of the weather instantly rose again, and stood where it was before the strange fire of the snake had sent it down. The first thing Farmer Weston did was to go back to his house and confide to his wife what he had seen. She was inclined to pooh-pooh him, but at last accompanied him to the barn with a lantern. They were confronted with startling surprises. The first was the effect the fiery serpent sport had had on the barn. The building was covered with what seemed to be a network of lay ropes, evidently marking where the snake had flashed about on, around, and over the barn. But the network wasn't ice? So far from it that a lighted candle held against the substance would not melt it. Going into the barn, they found their 2 horses standing motionless in their stalls. They were alive, warm to the touch, and breathing naturally, but they were powerless, even under the lashing of a whip. Geez, that's mean. To move a muscle. The shepherd dog lay on the barn floor, just as he had gone to sleep. The farmer soon discovered that the dog was lifeless. He stooped down to move him, and was amazed to find that he could not budge him, and it required the strength of both Weston and his wife to lift him. He had turned to solid stone. 3 days passed, during which time the Western farm was thronged with people who flocked to see the amazing sequences of the fiery serpent's visit, and the 2 horses, showing no sign of recovering from their strange paralysis, were killed. In the course of a week, the labyrinthine trail of the serpent on the barn crumbled away and fell off, so that the only tangible evidence of the appearance of the fiery, freezing, and paralyzing serpent that Farmer Western has on hand is the petrified dog. I would have gone up to the Delphi and pondered on that dog, but I had to get back home to Old Steuben in time for a town meeting and missed the chance. So yeah, that is a crazy story. It sounds to me like it's some kind of plasma being, and it has the power to petrify, maybe suck the life force out of living organisms. I'm thinking because the farmer was kind of back a ways, and he's a human, and you know, a human, I guess, bigger in brain or whatever. Maybe it didn't have that much of effect on him. He had that electric shock at first, and then the antidote shot at the last. And then, like, the horses being bigger animals, but being closer. Maybe they were, like, stuck in the in-between of being petrified and alive and just didn't come out of it. And then I feel like the dog, he might have just been sleeping, and little tiny thing. He just got the full petrification. But yeah, lots of crazy, crazy stuff in our realm. And I want to thank you all. This is my 20th episode. I have 118 subscribers, and I love each and every one of you. Thank you for coming with me on this journey. I'm glad that there's other people out there, more than 100 of you, that are interested in these newspaper articles and all the tidbits of information that they contain, and with everybody doing their own research and trying to connect the dots. I hope that by sharing these, that people can glean the information that they need and the clues that they're looking for in their own research. And I do wish you all a beautiful day, and I'll be back soon with some more crazy freaking articles from the land of the lost. See you later.